Let me make sure I've turned everybody on. Greetings, everyone. Nate the Nerdarchy here from Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. And today we're going to be talking about a whole bunch of concepts. But before we get into that, I want to introduce the nerd I'm hosting with.
I'm Kienata, and today it's going to be min-maxing, and there are other terms for that, and metagaming, and many of the taboos of Dungeons and Dragons, and just roleplay in general, really.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Fire up the nerd cannon.
Locked and loaded. All right. So what I wanted to talk about for this Nerdarchy After Dark is basically I wanted to get into the concepts of what's good and bad about certain aspects, like pros and cons. I like the pros and cons thing. I wanted to do that again. And one of the major things that I find is that a lot of people are like, metagaming's totally bad all 100% of the time. And I don't find that to be true. How's my sound, by the way? I'm kind of recovering from ailment.
Sound incredibly stuffed up. I'm also floating. There's just
yes.
Right. Yes.
With the power, I will set you back down to earth.
Your sound sounds fine to me. We'll wait.
Okay. Yep. People say it sounds good.
Okay.
So
you're good.
So I found that there's some rough ways to do metagaming, and the most hated way, I'd say, or the way that like frustrates DMs the most, is when you talk with one player and they're by themselves and everyone else is asleep or something, and a guy's like, hey, I absolutely am going to say this to this NPC, or I'm going to stab him in the back because I know he's actually like working against us or something, or some convoluted thing. And you're like, well, wait, how do you know that besides the player yourself knowing that?
Outside knowledge.
How are you using this? How are you figuring this out?
Yeah.
And there's ways of starting with metagaming and then getting to some kind of convoluted conclusion. But that also has its issues where it kind of feels forced, because you're coming from a standpoint of, you're asking yourself, how do I figure out how I know this? Rather than just knowing it in the game, your player character having access to the knowledge through some interaction, some skills check or something. And I think that's like, I'd say, the most negative version of metagaming.
I've had a variety of different versions of metagaming. Hey Bards, what's up? Jan. I've seen a variety of different versions. One of the versions of metagaming I ran into when I was a little kid a lot was well, not a little kid, I guess a teenager, was the players had a hard time drawing a line between real world knowledge and player character knowledge. And so the character would be doing things that only the player would know how to do. For instance, I want to make a gun. And I know the basic components of a bullet, of gunpowder, and I know where to get them. And I know how to properly try and like cast or forge a barrel.
Yeah, you know all the weird convoluted ways you'd have to go to process.
Right. I know the general concept. Give me a little bit of trial and error, and I could probably make a gun of a sort in the real world. So my character is acting these things out, and I found players would do that a lot when I was younger. They were trying to act out things that there's no way they would know that kind of knowledge or have that kind of knowledge.
Yeah, and I found was one game that somebody was a physicist out of time, like, you know, kind of like physicist in King Arthur's court kind of style of game. And they were like, well, I know how to make a nuclear weapon, so I want to try and make one of those suckers. And I'm like, are you kidding me? That's
what happened. Real quick, what happened? Patrick Keller said, what happened to this week's Monster Mash? It got moved to Monday. Nate is basically a dead man walking right now. I have a coffin like right over here. I'm just waiting for him to drop. So
yeah. So yesterday, if you can imagine, I was worse than this. And I think I stretched myself just the little bit of talking I did in the Spelljammer game earlier today. My voice is done between Spelljammer and child discussion, talking with my kids and things and my wife. and taking a little break, evening comes around and I'm like, yep, I'm actually a little more sick than I was this morning. So I am just about to have my voice break, I think, is what's going on. So who knows what the live chat tomorrow is going to look like, the Saturday live chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, we're moving the Monster Mash to Monday.
Yeah. And
it works out better for both of our schedules. And I said something to Kienata, and he's like, sure, that could work. So
yeah. Basically.
Yeah. And I wanted to give people a little more notice, but I was like, between needing to change the day, being super sick yesterday, it just made sense to push it to Monday.
Yeah, sometimes things just work the way they work.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's Geek and Sundry's Critical Roles on Thursday as well, Jan says in Twitch. So there is that benefit to avoiding that as well.
Mm.
So as far as what were we on metagaming, right? As far as so this physicist, it was like basically this person saw no problem with their physicist going and saying, all right, I'm just going to go and make this bomb and then I'll be able to rule the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, there's like a whole bunch of things against that, but that's a discussion for another time. I think player characters out of time could be a thing that we discuss, and the issues with just like, oh, I know how to make it go.
Just knowledge of science, just fundamental knowledge of the principles of science. All it takes is a mildly good knowledge of like some high school chemistry, and you can absolutely cause the complete destruction of an entire D&D campaign.
Yeah, the old way of life will fall away.
Yeah, they're like towns. Like if your character was evil, it wouldn't be I'm going to backstab the party. It's I'm going to collect all these chemicals and then put them in the water supply of that town, and now the whole town is dead.
They did just fine killing themselves off with all kinds of water supply issues, and that was without someone sabotaging things. Brian Barfield, I want to make a nuclear bomb. Make an intelligence check. I got a 21. You know what? You know that you don't have the materials. Yeah, just the sheer industry to drive the creation of the first one, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You could spend the next 30, you would need to research magical ways of extending your life to get the industry ready to be able to do that project. Do you know what I mean?
That sounds like life goals. That sounds good.
You're like,
what's
I travel back in time.
Character's life goal?
I need to become a lich so that I can make a nuke.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna make nukes, like for real. I'm getting it set up today.
So yeah, real world knowledge used in the fantasy world, or knowledge that you know about the game set that you're playing that your character hasn't been exposed to. And I like to kind of plead ignorance, or I misassume. Or I say, well, my character would know this because X. Like today, I assumed that the substance was sticky, but I was like, well, that kind of looks like the saliva that insects use to like stick stuff together. There's sticky stuff in the Spelljammer game. I thought to myself, I think my insectoid like crab person would totally know what a sticky substance looks like, a gelatinous sticky substance looks like. So I was like, I'm just going to assume it's sticky. I might be wrong because there's stuff crawling around on it and not sticking. So I could totally misassume, and that would be like an assumption towards my character's benefit, but a detriment towards my actual player character's life, assuming it let's say it was sticky and not interacting with it was the actual thing we needed. But anyway, that's like an example of, I guess, metagaming towards a direction you're not really sure if it's going to be beneficial or negative to your character. You're just like, well, my character knows X, so I'm going to go with that skill set and make an assumption from that direction. And that kind of, I think, is a good way to do it, because you're setting yourself up for possible failure or a possible benefit, but it'll be character driven. So there's a way of getting like around the metagame concept, is kind of direct from your character's perspective and then move outward towards things. So,
all right, we got chat. We'll do some comments and then we'll do a question. Sure. Jan said gunpowder is simple enough. That's very true. Casing to put the gunpowder in to use as an effective weapon is something else. Absolutely. And then James Lucas had a question, said, thoughts on taking spell skills that do not benefit the party as much for the sake of role play. Example, new group doesn't have a healer, but as a gloom stalker, I took Goodberry instead of Pure Wounds. Cure Wounds. Pure Wounds. They're pure and they're wounds. Cure Wounds.
All right, so Gloomstalker, you took Goodberry. Yeah, that would be more in line with if you had to pick between the two. That would kind of be more naturey and stuff. So I would rather have the Goodberry as well. Naturey and things.
Yeah.
So hey, you can play an entire game without a healer, even somebody with no, a person with no Goodberry. So
Yeah.
you can play the game with nothing. So you're actually better than nothing at that point if you've got Goodberry.
And I took a ranger and made tons of choices that were purely for the sake of roleplay. And the group of people I'm playing with right now and the GM were very, very supportive of me making a RP heavy character. Fitzroy Brumblebottom is by no means a monster in combat.
Wow.
You could almost say he's kind of bad at it. His highest stats of 14. I mean, the choices behind that character were very clear. There was an idea of a character. And then I kind of threw it to the party and said, do you guys care if I just go with Bob, the normal guy, that's a character? So, yeah.
And with him, it was like, I was helping you make that character, and I said, please, to have a 16, can you have 116? And you're like, no. You just want it to be well-rounded. Which overall, for an explorer or kind of like an adventure kind of person, that's actually really handy, because if you don't have a dump stat, you can't get caught by your own weakness in that sense. You can't be super explosive and excel at a particular thing, but you also can't be caught in a weakness. And I think you're just kind of like the above average adventuring type person. I mean, your main profession is a cook. You're adventurer second, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. I am on adventures because of where cooking took me. So, yeah. Elbenak said old shotgun shells were mostly paper, flintlock, and etc. don't use a casing. There was also matchlock, which is literally twisted paper around the charge and round. There are a bunch of those. There are a bunch of really cool stuff about that. Then another comment from Chris S. in YouTube. Metagaming makes sense during combat. My immediate reaction to that was to disagree. But then I continued to read the comment and kind of digested it for a minute. Okay. Like knowing you hit when you roll an 8, so realizing it's safe to use power attack. If your perspective on combat is that you're going to kind of lead, because you can't, as a role player, I have no way of gauging, is my sword really close to him? Is this a good time to roll the blade over and block with the back of the blade? Like all of the fundamental reactive choices you get to make in combat, you don't get to make those. So a good way to express that through the game is by getting to make mechanically involved choices, knowing exactly what he was saying, like knowing you hit when you roll an 8, so realizing it's safe to use power attack. I think that's pretty on point.
Well, I mean, the game kind of informs you whether or not it's super easy to hit something. So your character would be like, "Yep, it's super easy to hit this thing. I'm damaging it every round. I can probably swing for the fences."
Yeah, I think playing to the mechanics of combat in particular would be a great time to do a little metagaming and allow yourself to get to make nice, interesting tactical choices when you're in a fight. So, yeah.
Deba brings up, he likes the metagame. Well, it says, I like the metagame in the sense that Nerdarchy Dave talks about a lot in metagaming backwards. That's what I think Dave calls it as well, where if my character's intelligence is low, do dumb things that don't hurt the party. So yeah, you do things that kind of they change the way the encounter's going to happen because you've made a strange choice, and the strange choice might be strange for people who play a game, but it's not strange for the character that has a lower intelligence. Dave does this really well with Jogo from Saver Dice in his Saver Dice game, where he just is like, yep, this is the way Jogo's going to go. And in fact, the other players had to act differently around Jogo to avoid the stupid breaking the game, breaking the what happens for everybody else in the game. So, and I guess that's how you kind of have to be around a person that is like that, that's going to make choices that are not what you would make as a more intelligent individual.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, he says to himself, well, it's probably not a good idea to grapple this thing, but Jogo would do it, so I'm going to do it. Absolutely going to do it. In fact, I know it's bad to grapple this thing, but I'm going to try it anyway. And I think Ben from Puffin Forest with Nub Nub, he definitely makes choices that he knows are going to get either him or somebody else into a little bit of hot water.
Yeah. And Fitzroy just deeply cares about Nub Nub. So
it's a nice dynamic to it. But yeah, you've got to have
follow him in.
Those if none of the players have characters that are going to make mistakes, sometimes you got to have to like purposefully make those mistakes for the characters, knowing as the player that it's a mistake. And that's kind of where you can have really interesting scenes, because you're playing the character well in a developed situation.
This is interesting. Winnie the Fox in Twitch said, from what little I just heard, it really comes down to how theatric or how mechanical you want it to be. Kind of like, I guess, speaking towards the combat mechanics I was talking about. Kind of like dramatic kills in Skyrim. Sometimes it's satisfying to see that slow-mo dramatic combat or something, and so I would step away from metagaming and be more descriptive. Other times, these are a group of level 1 goblins. I want to clear them and move on fast. And yes, there are many times where the tactical choices aren't as, for me as a games master, I guess I should qualify this statement. For me, I'm not making a blanket, this is the right way to do this, but for me as a games master, there are many times when I absolutely step out of the mechanics and, Nate runs over and slams some guy's head into, he's like, I'm going to slam his head into the table and be like, tell me now, and put my knife to his throat. And I just decide based on how I feel about the situation that for the sake of story, Nate's not going to make any rolls. He just does it. I want the story to be compelling. I want everybody to feel involved. I know for a fact that I just got Nate super involved because I let him do that without having any thought of whether it was going to work or not. So, yeah, things like that. Sometimes I think it's really good to step out of the rules just for the sake of storytelling.
Yeah. God.
Well, I was just going to say, so bad metagaming. My favorite example of bad metagaming, I'll give a brief one and you can kind of build on this, but my favorite example of bad metagaming is go to a con with a pre-built adventure and there's supposed to be a secret bad guy.
Oh, yeah.
And you sit down to run the adventure and one of these guys at the table or gals at the table is ready to kill the person as soon as they meet them. And that, the person's not supposed to get any fights yet. They're trying to entrap you or do something bad to you. But yeah, that's bad metagaming.
Yeah, if you're trying to unlock secrets in an Adventure League game or something like that because you've read the module.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's good to change stuff just enough so that it keeps them guessing. Just in case they want to, just in case you don't know. It's kind of rough when you've got this situation. Like, they could do that purposefully, or they could have said to themselves, I wonder if I think he said this in this game, or it's kind of like blurring together with the time you read it or the time that you played it previously. If this is the second time you've played it, maybe you played it with your home group and you're playing it eventually because you really liked it. And it's kind of like blurring together what information you know from previously, what your character knows, and what you know as the player. So that gets kind of messy in that situation. And then sometimes it's just going to be, I think James Leslie talks about it. It's you got to be able to play your character, be able to justify how or why your character knows what he does, and not bring in bad knowledge. And that we don't like when people do that as the GM, but it is a difficult task especially if you've played for so long. If I played an adventure 3 or 4 times, and in fact I have, thankfully I'm the GM every time. I couldn't imagine if someone played my Night Terrors 3 or 4 times. It would be very hard if you've played the first time and won it the way that I envisioned the encounter, the whole entire night going. If you played through that and then played through it 3 more times, I could see it being very hard not to just direct by the nose like the entire party towards doing what you know will work. So that's a tough call, especially because not doing the right thing might end in everybody being eaten by terrible blobby black monsters from the shadows.
Oh, now I miss Monster Mash. You said blobby black monsters, and I thought of our ooze-filled zombies.
Oh man, yeah.
Oh, now I'm sad.
Squishy goodness. Well, Monster Mash is this Monday, so we'll be okay.
Brian Barfield said, that's why I was creating my own monsters for encounters. You can't know an enemy's weaknesses if you've never heard of it before. There's good and bad with that. Sometimes it's excellent to have players have knowledge of something, if only to give them some concept of how to deal with it or react to it. But yeah, absolutely. There's a
lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm going to grab a few that I see. You just pick any up that I miss. All right. So is GM metagaming good or bad? Does it even exist? And there's also, what would you that's from Johnny Pumpkinhead. And then Brian Barfield, what would you classify as DM metagaming, and how does it compare to player metagaming? All right. So I'll kind of answer both of those together, hopefully. So GM metagaming, you kind of do it all the time in a way. You got to run the adventure. You got to know certain things and how different things are going to react. But okay, I guess you know more than any of the PCs know for the most part, except how the dice rolls are going to go. So that's the only variable. So you can easily do metagaming as a GM by knowing your players' skills, knowing what to expect out of them, and then acting upon that would be something like countering their specific skill set almost every single combat with things. And it'll get a little too weird, wonky, and kind of unrealistic at a certain point. I mean, because if everybody's invulnerable to mind magic and your bard is come on, I've been wrecking every encounter until now with mass suggestion and hypnotic pattern and all this kind of stuff, and now we're just fighting a slew of constructs out of the blue.
I would say GM metagaming would be, I would feel like a GM has to be a master metagamer in order to keep up with you're just one human brain. There's just one of you. And there's 6 very intelligent humans sitting at your table, or 5 or 4, however many, and they are perfectly capable of outsmarting you regularly. So to some degree, you have to have some level of metagame or some amount of work done ahead of time to try and deal with some of the things players would do. But at the same time, I'd say an example of a GM badly metagaming, doing something that I would consider in poor taste. I think the classic example of there's a 10-story tower, and at the top of the tower is the big bad guy. And the wizard says, okay, we all teleport to the top of the tower. And the GM says, there's a bubble that prevents teleportation. And the wizard says, I fly to the top of the tower. And the GM says, there's an anti-flight bubble. And the player says, I cast spider climb on all the players, and we climb the tower. And he says, the tower is too slow. And so you end up with this arms race of metagaming. I would definitely say that's bad. GM.
The counter, because I want you to go through all of the things I have laid out, I will refuse to let you creatively problem solve. Right. Yeah, that's because if it was an RPG or some kind of video game, you couldn't come up with creative solutions. But if you could actually fly, you could fly to the top of that sucker and fight that guy.
But that's the problem. That's the reason why I hate to draw contrasts between video games and stuff like that. In a huge degree of video game is that it's incredibly limiting. Yes. As far as what you're capable of doing. But at the same time, people would be like, well, but in this video game, you could do that if you wanted to. Why didn't you account for that? And that's because the game can mathematically calculate the end result of any course of action you're going to take. The programmers can calculate all these courses of action and have most of the time years to determine this. And your GM may have come up with this adventure in the last 3 hours. So it's not a fair comparison at all. Right. I love what Chris S. said. GM has to metagame to the game's benefit, not his or her own. That's exactly right.
Yeah, and that includes, you know, the type of, well, they've figured out a creative solution to something, and I want them to run through the entirety of what I have. If they continuously think that through, there's going to be situations where you're going to have to, well, later, let's say the first time there's this 10 story tower and there's a big bad on top. All right, they go up and they just kill the big bad. Well, next time, perhaps, if you've ever done that scenario again, you go to a dungeon and you're like, oh, we'll just dig to where we think the guy is and attack him.
Mm-hmm.
You can instead have things that they have to have collected or things they have to have done, excuse me, to get to that scenario. So you can kind of craft situations where eventually you can get that. If you want as a DM to have a dungeon crawl, you can kind of craft that scenario so that it will occur. But if you, like, yeah, that arms race, going back and forth, being like, well, I've canceled that out. With it, at that point, it's just make pretend, like we're 5 again, and we're saying,
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
well, I have an invulnerability shield. Well, I have bullets specially designed to pierce invulnerability shields. You're like, well, I have titanium armor, and you just go back and forth, and it's just like, my kids.
Nate and I regularly have this fight.
I have kids under 10 years of age that do that.
Yeah.
And whenever they get in that army, I'm like, no, you're going to stop right now because I'm not going to listen to this for 5 minutes, and it's going to end in a fight. Like a nasty, like, rah, rah, rah fight.
Yeah.
And that can be, you know, getting to that situation where you've got going like back and forth 10 times can really kind of quash the whole creativity of the group and also set people to be just irritated. Like, oh, yeah, what are you going to tell me next time that this magic thing has that I can't do XYZ thing to it?
I think it's important to go back to the focus as we talk about all of this stuff, metagaming and power gaming and all of these things. I think it's important to go back and talk about the focus of role-playing games. To me, that is everybody at the table came to have fun, so you should all be having a good time. And it is cooperative storytelling. It's not just the game master's world and story. The players also have stories to tell, and it's about them too. So it's cooperative storytelling, and metagaming can really get in the way of that. It just depends, I guess.
And I would say we've got a character in Ted's game, his Curse of the Narcotis game, and it's a bard, and he's super powerful. And if he can manipulate them or charm something, he does a really great job of doing it between his magic items and his whole entire setup. And he basically built his characters, spells to go along with that. Well, every once in a while, we'll have a construct that just does not care. And we have a hard fight because that construct is pounding everybody and are like ace in the hole for dealing with things that can be mind manipulated. The bard is like, well, sorry, I can slam it with destructive attacks and shatter and stuff, but that's it. I can't tell it to go like punch its friend or anything like that. And you know, it's just like a different type of challenge. And you can get around that as a DM by just simply saying, well, rather than trying to counter that guy's skill unnaturally every single time, which makes it feel like he just wasted his effort building his character because he's got all these skills he can't use. Just, you know, it's like the same thing with a wizard. If you've got somebody who's going to charm or sleep half the enemies, just put in twice the enemies. They get to launch their fireball, blow like, boom, 50 goblins are dead. Well, there's also 50 more. Oh no, 25 of them are asleep. You know, and now the fighter is buzzing through them and like all this stuff's going on. But they get the impact the combat, and you can still make a challenging, fun encounter without just shutting down one of the player's abilities completely as you're problem solving as the DM. And that's what I'd say is like, you know, it's kind of like once you get to a certain level, you're like, why do all the enemies groups have counter spells? You know, this is kind of I'm not able
MMO power scaling.
Yeah, if anybody's familiar with Magic the Gathering, it's like the old school blue deck counterspell decks that just shut down your ability to play. So it's like, I'm not really playing the game. I'm just spending mana and not doing anything. And that's kind of the thing is like, as a DM, if you're just throwing things against them that shut down their character abilities or make them useless, that is not a fun game to play. You know, 10 encounters in, you're just like, all right, I'm just swing my stinking sword again because I can't do anything else that'll affect these creatures.
I have found, especially with newer GMs that are looking to create intense moments and crazy encounters for their players. I have found that many times they do make some counterproductive choices in order to try and make it so the big bad will be scarier or whatever. And I think to some degree they may be missing the more interesting thing taking place is that their players are having a blast. I know the big bad just got, you just got set back on the adventure idea you had or whatever.
My beautiful plans.
I know your beautiful plans just got set back, but stop for a minute while you're feeling disappointed. Look at your players. Are they having a good time? Then mission accomplished. Go make another big bad and let this guy go in the toilet. Your players are going to love whipping him up, like...
Winnie the Fox and Jay Spence both bring up good points. Jay Spence says depends on the intelligence of the big bad. And then when the Fox is because the heroes have gained a reputation, and then a reputation among their enemies, and their enemies have adapted. Yes, in both situations, if the enemy has the resource or the preparatory time, and also the ability to gain together whatever, like a strategy against the party, yeah, that's where you're going to have something nasty occur. But if you don't do that every encounter, your players will completely accept when someone has finally caught on to their trick for how do they defeat every single group of enemies that come at them. It's like, oh, why is my light that I carry around on my staff winked out of existence? Oh gosh, there's a giant trap. Like eventually someone's like, I'm going to shut down, I'm going to hire a mage mercenary and I'm going to shut them down and they're just going to fall into this trap and I'll have them. And at that point you can, that is a scenario that it makes complete sense because they have gained a reputation or they are fighting something intelligence that has gained their notice. They have gained its notice. So yeah, there's going to be times when the enemy is going to understand the flaws of the player characters or the weak points in their strategies. Or they're like ace in the hole that they throw out every time they want to really decimate a group or conquer a group. Those are going to come up, but when you don't do that when every big bad doesn't know all their ins and outs and dirty secrets and weak spots, then when one does, it's impactful and the characters usually completely accept that they've got one put over on them because they understand you're not just simply gamist countering their abilities.
Right, absolutely. You're not just flatly. I think Fragginator had a funny little bit there. Fragginator said, I had a situation last Friday that had magical darkness. My character's a warlock with devil's sight, which would allow you to see in magical darkness. The DM was just like, your magic darkness vision can't see in this super magic darkness. GM, I'm going to give you a minute to think about what just came out of your mouth. You take a sec. And then come back at me, okay? Because you're hurting me you're upsetting me right now. I can see in the dark. I kind of got it for these specific situations.
Where someone hits me with darkness. Now, there is some types of dark vision that can see through darkness.
Yeah.
But can't see through all magical darkness. I think the shadow sorcerer is like that. They can make darkness they can see through. I might remember that right. I don't know. I made a character. He's a shadow sorcerer, but I don't remember all the rules all the time. Yeah, that's like that arms race thing. It's like, well, you can't see through this. Now, perhaps they have a terrible artifact that is made of shadow stuff. I could see that happening.
It sounds like there was not enough. With the way Fragginator's talking, it sounds like there was no context for the hand of Vecna being what was generating the darkness here. So
maybe you just need to wait. Next week, you'll find out that it was literally a super magical darkness.
Yeah. No, another thing that really bothers me is when the games master decides that the power level of the players is maybe something they simply don't want to deal with. So rather than adapting to what the players are doing, the GM will take away everything you own and throw you off somewhere, like you're in prison and you have none of your stuff done. That's where we're going to start from. I understand that things like that happen in gaming sessions, but I really, really don't like it when the GM is like, I'm going to take away all your personal possessions. I feel kind of like I feel about that like I do about dream sequences.
You don't like jail sequences? You just want them to be murdered and start a new character.
If you're gonna really, if I made my character and I have this +1 sword and I like clean it all the time, it's like a big deal for me to have it, and you're gonna take it away from me, I'm not gonna be super upset, but I want to know what's going on in the story. If there's not some great story why I lost this sword that is like an extension of my character, you can just kill my character off at that. Just kill him.
It's because they pried it from your nearly cold, dead hands.
Yeah, exactly.
You were mostly dead at the time.
Okay. All right. What about, so you're GMing, Nate.
Yeah.
And I come to the table. And we're not going to be mean when we talk about this. We're going to leave 3.5 out of the argument because we could be really brutal to 3.5 if we wanted.
I played that for like a decade or something. I like 3.5.
Everyone played it for 3. And Pathfinder played that. But what if Nerdator Doug said, "Now I have to swipe Fitzroy's Arkansas toothpick"?
If it ends up in my possession, I don't think he'll kill me, Doug. Just to let you know.
Well, what if I show up to your gaming table and I have clearly created a character that is bent on death and destruction? This character has no defining characteristics about them other than an axe for which I have a specific set of combinations to do a maximized amount of damage. That's what the character is.
The role playing I do is I hit it with my axe.
Yes.
And so that's it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're saying that bugs you?
What if
I was a GM and you showed up like that?
You're the GM and I showed up like that.
Well,
clearly all I want to do, please do not bully 3.5.
We're not going to.
We're not going to.
I played it and enjoyed it very much so.
There are some game systems which are easier to make more combat heavy combinations in, and so we're gonna avoid those and we're gonna stay with 5e.
Yeah. All right. Well, I would kind of walk you through like, well, what did they do before now? Were they an adventure somewhere? Were they like home on the farm? Like what's their roots? Where'd they come from? Like, I'd go in through stuff like that. Basically, like, draw the concepts out of you by asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
But I would also be like, well, we don't always do combat. The last 4-hour session I had was downtime, and I don't think anybody rolled dice to kill people.
There were no fights.
There was 4 hours, so I mean, I think Rick and a few other people are in the chat. Yeah, there was no fighting as far as I remember. There was some nasty carousing rolls, though.
And this goes to my buddy makes every player character like that. All he wants is a glorious death. Right. So what if you're dealing with players that's focus is nuking things? Are you going to, as a GM, adapt to making more combat encounters so that you feel like you can have that player get to do their thing?
I would probably, okay, if there was somebody who just kind of wanted to roll dice to kill things.
Well, if somebody comes to my table and says, all I want to do is role play, that's great. But there's a catch. That's because that's the kind of GM I am. I don't use as much combat as other people do. Other GMs like more combat. That's the kind of GM they are. So how would you deal with this guy coming to the table and saying, I came for the blood spray and the murder fest?
Well, I would let them know that we're not going to do a lot of combat. And I would also probably challenge them in ways that are going to be, well, they might get frustrated and attack somebody, which there will be repercussions if they attack the wrong kind of person. Mm-hmm. And maybe that will have to happen a few times. They might die. Not because I'm out to kill them, but because simply the player themselves might need to learn that sometimes you will just get killed because you want to attack something you shouldn't. So if his or her reaction to role-playing rather than attacking or fighting or murder-lading, whatever, is to attack the thing that is trying to roleplay with it, then, that's just going to happen. I'm not out to get that person to show them the errors of their ways. I'm just going to simply put challenges that they might choose to engage in the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
And I would encourage them to possibly pick up some kind of musical instrument or some kind of other story element that they'd have available to themselves. Because I mean, even what is it? Even like a lot of the sword swinging fantasy movies, the characters have some kind of humanizing quality to them. They're not just muscles with a sword. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
There's something about, even if it's just one or two scenes, little scenes in a movie, there's something about them that is like, oh, this person likes XYZ thing, or they're nice to kids because
the Marines in Aliens. The Marine or that movie, those Marines were two-dimensional killing machines, but they were all unique characters that had something interesting going on about them. Even though the adventure for those Marines and Aliens was literally go somewhere and shoot things. That was their adventure. Go get in a fight. They still had cool interactions and they were still interesting. So,
but you're talking about a player who's going to play more like the alien, which is, all right, rip off this guy's face, rip off this guy's face, punch this guy's face off, make babies. Got it.
I usually try to, in session 0, tell everyone, give the dragon situation, like you could fight this dragon, but I didn't put the dragon here for you to fight it. If you run in at level 1 to fight the ancient red dragon, it's just going to breathe on you and eat the remains. You're done. There's no living through that. That's just a loss. So just because it's there doesn't mean you can kill it. As long as everyone will agree to those parameters, they can really play whatever kind of player they want. Just as long as they understand that the world is dangerous, and if they are crazy, they're going to be dead.
Yeah, so. Make a foolish enough decision or a hard-headed enough decision often enough, something's going to kill you.
This sounds really cool. Jan Novak said, well, we were playing more like Diablo, kind of 5e, because all but me are newbies to D&D. There's only experience.
Oh, Vampire the Masquerade is their only experience?
Oh, okay, all right. I was not sure what that was. So they are all neutral, evil, more solo oriented, but we have progress. That's very interesting. I've seen, this is something that Nate and we've been throwing this idea about talking about the younger generation of players, because I've seen such a change in how D&D gets played by the younger generation of players.
I want to quickly go back to your fighter kill machine guy.
Yes.
Now I would like
awesome because he has a huge axe. I know.
Now I would like to say, I have won it. I mean, there's a reason why I play some video games. I have won it to just go for 5 or 6 hours, play through a dungeon crawl, and I would have loved to have been that character rather than the character I had, because I just wanted to blow off some steam and just goof off and roll some funny shaped dice. I didn't want to try and, RP the hardest I've ever role played in my life. I just wanted to kind of goof around. So there are times where I just would like to have that character. So, and some people just like to see people like to just have fun that way. So, yeah.
Winnie the Fox has a really, really cool example of the murder machine that could work. Now I am thinking about what it would be like role-playing One Punch Man. One Punch! He so desperately wants the satisfaction of a good fight. That's a very interesting angle to take on a character, especially a D&D character.
Who's like ridiculously good at fighting.
Stealth swords or guard escorts as a background. Yeah, absolutely. They need to be railroaded a lot. They're a bit confused when I let them in a sandbox themed situation. I have found when allowing players that are unfamiliar with what they can do in a sandbox, I've literally had a little kid in a sandbox. I'm trying to let these children play D&D and be in a sandbox situation. And one of the kids is so excited. He's like, I run up and I'm going to get a sword. There's a sword under the table. And I pull out the sword and then I'm just going to stab people and I'm just going to start And I'm like, Where'd the sword come from again? Can we back this up? What are you talking about? Because they don't fully comprehend it. And this is not uncommon. New D&D players in all age groups tend to want to know what the restrictions are. How do we do this?
Yeah, how's the game actually going to get played? Telling me I can do whatever isn't really good for a new player, because they're like, well, technically you can't do whatever. A seasoned player would know you can't technically do whatever, but a new player is going to be like, well, I know there's rules, but what's whatever falls within the rules but still is something like in my choice category. So they're kind of slowly evolving the type of actions they know are acceptable to do in the game. So as they get more and more experience, they understand what they can push with a particular DM as choices, which are totally legit choices. I'm not saying like getting one over on the DM, but just taking totally legit choices and making decisions that can fall within that sandbox game, rather than I grab a sword from underneath the table, it glows with blue fire, and I fly through the air and chop off this guy's head.
Can I see your character sheet? I think you did something you're not supposed to.
Yeah. And then
Cuba the Barbarian, can you answer a question for me? Yes, I can.
Definitely. Done. Ding.
I have no idea what the question is yet.
Yeah.
I'll find out in a minute.
Give us the question. So I think you were trying to lean towards min-maxing concepts.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I figured the subtle, not so subtle, swinging my axe guy. So
yes,
min-maxing is another one of those things that's just like, raw. Some people hate it completely. And other people are like, well, that's what I do all the time. And I know at Nerdarchy we get some flack from people who are just like, you're just making these ridiculous characters that are like using the rules and all that kind of stuff and maxing out characters. I'm like, well, we do builds to try and like make a concept, but they're not like, I built this character so I win the game. That doesn't happen really.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of like, we made a dragoon from Final Fantasy. And one of his special abilities was you could jump and charge with a lance. Or a spear. Or a glaive or something. That was his coolest power, and we built the character around being able to do that. And dragon scale mail with a ring and jumping. So it's a cool
That
attack. And yes, if he's fighting someone one-on-one and they can't get to him in time, he's probably going to beat them because he can leap like 30, 40 feet and then leap someplace that that person can't get to. So yeah, I could see it being kind of like, oh, I win all the time, but not really, because ranged weapons. And there's all these other kind of things that disrupt that character's ability to conquer all the combats. So that's one thing I consider, like, we do a lot of builds, and yes, it is pretty much min-maxing stuff, but it's min-maxing towards some kind of goal. And
right, a theme.
And my gripe about people who are like, well, I want to make non-min-max characters because otherwise you're just cheesing the game or something. You're like... Ooh.
I thought of a game system we can pick on. A game system I absolutely adore. I was trying to think of a game system because I wanted to make this example. This example. And Kiba the Barbarian, I see your question. I'm going to hit it in just a minute. So I wanted to make this example. Game systems sometimes lend themselves to unrealistic character builds, in that those character builds are so drastically more powerful than other people in the same group.
Well, for the scope of the game, pretty much. Yeah.
Right. For the scope of the game, it's very hard for those other players to shine. Shadowrun is an excellent example where the GM has to babysit character generation. In Shadowrun, you can have a character that can literally take a shotgun blast to the chest, session 1. And I don't mean take it and live through it. I mean take it and be like, oh. And this is a world where guns are supposed to be dangerous. So, or literally like make their hand glow and chop through an I-beam of a huge tower at level 1.
All right.
Yeah, these are like crazy abusive things. And if you need context for what Shadowrun is like, it's just a cyberpunk setting. So if I hit you with a crowbar, it should probably hurt unless you're super tough, in which case it didn't hurt super bad. But the ability to do these like super insane things, it's the kind of thing where the games master has to keep an eye on things or stuff gets out of control.
So now with that Shadowrun detour, you must remind me what I was talking about previously.
Oh God,
I
I'm
did.
reading Kiba's question.
Okay,
Okay,
min-maxing, talking about different interesting character builds, talking about that, normally the character builds can't win in all situations, so it's kind of irrelevant that they've min-maxed. And this kind of fight against min-maxing with the idea that you're going to just sit there and be like, well, I purposely made a crummy character stat-wise so that I cannot be accused of min-maxing. I was like, well, there's a million people in the world that could all be adventurers in fantasy games. Just be the guy to the left of that crummy character and just play the cool the cool character that can actually get something done.
Mm-hmm. Kiba the Barbarian, I'm trying to fully absorb your question. I'm going to go ahead and read it out. We're going to see what I can do with this. In the campaign I am in, I got my party put into prison because I killed a blood hag, and the people thought the blood hag was a noble, so you killed a blood hag that a bunch of other people, like the townsfolk or whatever, thought was a noble. Now we have to do a maze, so you got the party thrown into prison, and all of you have to do a maze to see if you are true. So to see if you were like good people and it really was a blood hag, maybe to prove your guilt or innocence.
Oh, kind of like a test by some magical artifact or something.
And what do I think of that situation? RP wise, I can see the group being a little bit grumpy with you, but in character, I'd be like, "This is we have to do a maze,"
Yeah, because if it was actually a hag and you weren't just a crazy person that had killed some random woman,
murdered a noble in the
murdered
street.
some noble in the street, it'll be proven through the act of going through this maze is what it sounds like, and then your character will be vindicated, but then also the rest of them will be as well, and it'll be kind of like you'll be ahead of the game technically. Do you know what I mean? Like getting through the maze is actually a benefit for your group because they'll have clear defined these people did a good thing that was a terrible hidden monstrosity in our midst.
Yeah.
So that's actually one of the better ways, because imagine you killed the blood hag, then got away, but everyone thinks you murdered a noble. Yeah, you're not in prison having to go through a maze, but you're probably wanted. And then once you start killing towns guards that are trying to stop you because they think you killed a noblewoman, and once you start getting paladins after you, thinking you killed somebody in cold blood, and you kill those guys, then you've got actual good people murdered, killed in self-defense, but still,
right?
How you gonna deal with that afterwards? It's way better to go through the maze.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. At least the GM got you guys into a maze and didn't do the innocent people are trying to capture you. Like, these are people who are just doing their jobs. And you have to kill them, and now you're kind of skirting the moral boundary. So yeah,
and not doing their jobs like terrible military crimes, but doing their jobs like they think they're doing the correct and right and just thing to do, because you're supposedly a criminal. For
the record, I adore Shadowrun, but every time I have players make up characters for Shadowrun, you have to be at the table when they do it. You have to watch everything they do, because it's very easy to break the system. And that's the kind of game system it is. And someone in Twitch mentioned Palladium. Do we want to open that Pandora's box?
I would just say that every thing that people might not like in D&D due to min-maxing or power gaming or whatever you want to call it, that they can really dial it up, I think. In what you can pick in Palladium and
power scaling
wise, because I remember playing a game in it where I was some kind of psyker with a vibro knife, and I was like, this is a cool cat, I'm just called Shadowbird, and doing all this stuff, and I'm like this psychic I'm like a psychic vampire kind of guy. And my most powerful weapon is a vibro blade, two short swords, like long knives. And then this guy goes and takes his mech and transforms into a hovercraft and starts shooting missiles at things. And I'm like, we can't play in the same game.
It's scaling.
Because But we were playing in the same game. But you can't play those two characters in the same game without just me getting hit and killed by some kind of mega damage thing. But, you know...
It's one of those things. Palladium is another game where your session 0 is everything.
Yeah, because you can say, we're playing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Yeah. Everybody knows what that game's supposed to look like.
Right. And if you're going to abuse the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles system, the way you would do that is you would make a mutant elephant and then you would decrease your size, which allows you to increase your strength disproportionately. And you would make it so you're a 3-foot tall mutant elephant that can bench press like a 747.
You min-maxer.
Every one of the systems, the first thing I do is, what can I do with this?
What can I break in this game?
And if you're playing Palladium, bodybuilding and boxing and athletics, they literally add to your stats. Everyone should have it. I'm just saying.
Back, what's happening in D&D time?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I have to say, I did enjoy, I love the storyline for Palladium.
Mm-hmm.
I love. If, like, you just took Palladium and just threw D&D rules on it, I'd be like, oh yeah, in a second, I'm playing
Eric
that game.
Hansen said, watch out for Shadowbird.
Hey, it was a long time ago, all right? It was a long time ago.
Oh,
he wore all black. I'm just gonna leave it there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anyway.
Hey, Thunderbird was a really cool car, so I said to myself, why not?
What if it's a slightly darker version of a Thunderbird? A Shadowbird.
A lightningless bird. A lightningless night bird. Shadow.
Johnny Pumpkinhead said, Kienata, those game systems have feelings. Please stop breaking them.
We love those systems for their own reasons.
Yeah, I loved Riffs. I played Glitter Boy and a Juicer. I played that Glitter Boy and that Juicer forever. If you want to talk about silly names in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I had a 6-foot tall mutant weasel that was named Sparrowhawk. And everyone made fun of him because they were like, you named your mutant animal other animals?
Yeah, after what will probably eat it?
2 birds? You couldn't have mixed it up with like a snake and a bird? Come on. Yeah.
Cobra. Sparrow.
Cobra. Sparrow.
Cobra
Ninja
Hawk.
Sparrowhawk Turtle.
Well, hey, the game Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, right there. It's already got 4 words to describe what it is. So why not have Sparrowhawk be your name?
Yeah. Don't take me discussing the ins and outs of these game systems. Champions? Come on, Champions. There's some craziness going on with that game system, but it all ultimately falls back to, if you had a good session 0, you'll never run into a problem. Everybody's on the same page, so you're good.
So that would be like the far end of min-maxing, is the person who's like, I know how to abuse the rules. Like, let's say you play Palladium. Everyone could have like a gentleman agreement that we're going to have a certain power level to the game.
Player agreement.
And Palladium can be awesome to play in.
Yeah.
But you have a min-maxer walk in and be like, well, I know I'm late to the table. I made my character. Here it is. And you're like, you are not playing a gargoyle with a mega laser on its forehead. I don't care.
Yeah. My mind was blown with that game system. I came from D&D where it's dwarves and AD&D second ed. It was like dwarves and elves and gnomes and stuff. And then you open the Palladium RPG book for the fantasy setting, and you can be literally a giant wolf person. And I was like, this is the best day of my life. Like, I was so excited. I'm like 15. Oh man, this is awesome. Yeah.
So if everybody has an agreement, hey, we're going to play at this certain power level in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not going to go above it, and the DM's not going to kill us with a dragon with 50 billion mega lasers on its face or anything like that. Whatever you said the other day. And that's just fine. And then everybody can like work together to craft a cool group that is going to be balanced enough and not be crazy. But a min-maxer comes in that's really hardcore into I want to do the hardest, most hard-hitting character I can in the game.
Yeah.
And that's going to upset the balance of the whole group. Similarly, if you have a whole bunch of people who are just playing the game and like, oh yeah, I made this guy. I want him to have a high charisma. And well, I mean, like you're a ranger,
Fitzroy.
In just yeah, Fitzroy and
He doesn't have a high anything.
Yeah, he's pretty much above average in all things.
Yeah.
And I think that works out really well. But he's not going to be the one shining highest in combat.
Right.
And that's fine because I mean, I didn't go in with saying, well, I'm going to get an 18 and a 20 as soon as possible in my deck.
You have 4 arms. You could have taken that a number of different directions. Yeah. That would have been crazy. So
I said, ooh, I can do an extra bonus action as long as it's not the same bonus action I take, the first bonus action I take. Yeah. That sounds great. I'm a rogue. I could have really min-maxed the heck out of that.
Can I stab with 4 daggers and backstab?
Well, technically you couldn't because you have to take a different action with the secondary bonus action. But you can do so much stuff. You can dash and do an extra attack. You can do all this kind of stuff. And if I really wanted to just min-max my output of damage, I could have built a different character. So
we have Steve Owensby has a question. A few years back, I played a game, sci-fi, don't know the system, maybe GURPS, but there were lava spider things that broke into a space station and could melt through walls. Everyone was... Steve, there better be more of your question. I'm trying to find the rest of it. I don't see any more. Oh, no. Steve, finish your question. I'll reread it from the beginning. Oh, there we go. Coming up with plans on how to get by. My character was a cyborg foot soldier. I threw a liquid nitrogen tank from the med bay in the room and shot it, killing the spider. Oh, he's got more. He's got more.
I think there's a character limit per group. What happened? We don't
was know. Guessing that it would work. Oh, yeah, no, I'm on the edge of my seat. I'm like, what happened to the spider? No,
did you all suffocate in the boiling of all the nitrogen that happened on the spaceship?
Look, he's saying he threw a liquid nitrogen tank on a creature that's clearly made of lava or whatever, right? This flaming hot spider.
Did turn him into cool obsidian?
Yeah, I absolutely wouldn't consider that metagaming, especially considering the fact that you are a cyborg, which to me immediately says you probably have some knowledge of basic science. Like, you know, at least enough to know liquid nitrogen is cold and what liquid nitrogen is. I would say that you would have at least as much knowledge as any modern human. Maybe you don't know how to repair your own cybernetics, but you at least know this works. And one time my fingers stopped moving, so I had to move a wire around up here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I definitely wouldn't consider that metagaming. Nice. Doug said, Glitter Boy for the win. That was my first Rifts character. Picked it because it looked cool, then realized, whoa, this thing is mega powerful. Yeah, I shot the face off a dragon my very first game with the Glitter Boy and was like, never changing it. My character. This is me forever. Yeah. Oh, here we go. Winnie the Fox said the Wolven are the best race and was why Palladium Fantasy was my first RPG and not Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah. Loved the Wolven. They blew my mind. They absolutely blew my mind. I think there's a picture in the Palladium Fantasy book of a Wolven, like, I think he's sitting with I don't remember if he has like a sword or something. He's just like sitting. And just that picture, that's like a 15-minute stare. Because I used to do that all the time as a little kid. My imagination would get so active when I saw those images. I'd just be like, what? Yeah, exactly. The wheels would turn. Yeah, so another thing that I want to talk about, you have the people who do the over min-maxing where they've kind of like twisted the rule. Almost twisted the rule. They've kind of like did the whole thing to get the maximum out of their character. And then you've got the people that will do the exact opposite with the idea that somehow increases their roleplay skill or their cred, their street cred as a role player rather than a person playing a game. Yes.
And I find that to be kind of a bit condescending because, I mean, we are playing a game.
And you don't have to be terrible to have a role play heavy character. And in fact, the question may come up, how have you lived this long?
Yeah.
If you go on adventures, and this is what your character is. So
my counter to anybody making a bad character is a bad mechanical character is why don't you just play the hero that's grew up with that guy instead? Or why don't you just, well, that person, let's say that person died pretty early on because, you know, adventuring's hard and bad things happen to people who can't make it.
One goblin would ruin them.
And now you play a character who actually could live through the encounters I've got planned. Now, there is a nice quality if you're the only character that is either super weak constitution wise. Let's say you play the mage with an 8 con. And you're like, well, I pretty much don't have a lot of hit points, and that's kind of my thing. Is I was sick, I just barely made it through childhood, was always having problems, and now I'm here. But I've read books all the time, so that's why I'm a super awesome mage. So that kind of character, I wouldn't consider that like purposely making a bad character. I would consider that having a good use of your flaw.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So there's a difference between a good use and story element flaw to trying to do the opposite of min-maxing so that you can say like, well, I'm really this awesome role player and that's why I have a crappy character.
And I decided that I would draw the line on how low or mundane my stats would be. I basically said, well, rather than have me choose, I threw it at my games master and one of my players. Nate was there and Doug was there. And I said, what do you guys want to do? And Nate basically was like, I'll just pick some stuff for you. And there's nothing wrong with doing something like that. There wasn't anything in the character that I thought needed to be particularly high other than the fact that the character hunted all the time. So he shouldn't have below 10s or anything in his physical attributes. He like hikes and goes and does stuff. And then he would need to have a reasonably good wisdom if he's, you know, got his wits about him when he's hunting and stuff. So
yeah, I think the most interesting thing about your character is that he's kind of that all-around explorer guy with a passion.
You stopped moving. Oh, I assume you'll start moving again. Ooh.
Oh no! What is it doing? My internet connection has been unstable. Well, it says it's fine. I hope everything's fine. They'll let us know if we've... Oh, wait. You've stopped moving. Oh, no. This could be a problem.
That is so loud. Okay. Hi.
You had to hop off and hop back on?
Yes.
I am moving, right?
Yes.
Great. Sorry about that, everybody.
Yeah, no problem.
Zoom is giving us a problem today. Zoom's been like perfect for like every stream for the past month and a half. There's like
a cardboard cutout where I used to be. Yay! I'm back. Hi.
Yeah, you're like.
All right. Perfect.
I'll just have to randomly stop during it to make you think that I was.
Both feeds look good.
All right. Yeah, okay. I don't know. I think I love Zoom and I love how low bandwidth it is.
Mm-hmm. But it is weird sometimes.
It's being a little wonky today.
Literally, when you said that, it goes, it's brink wonky today. Maybe their servers are super busy. Maybe there's like a Microsoft conference somewhere and they have 3,000 people on this.
Perhaps. It is a Friday. It's a cool Friday night. So Infantry Gaming, yo, hey, Nerdarchy guys. This is my first time catching your live stream. Well, welcome.
Welcome to the party, sir.
Stay a little while.
We need to come up with a character story for you and how you met the rest of the adventuring party. Old Grumpy goes, Kienata froze. I like waffles. I like turtles. Okay. All right. So where were we before there were giant internet explosions?
Talking about like the person who's really into the RP and they purposely make a bad mechanical character.
A mechanically weak character.
Yeah, mechanically weak character.
I don't think there's ever a reason to make a character that is not functional. the whole point is that we get to tell the story about people being heroic. But I will say that there are characters that are in stories that are talked about that are essentially non-functional characters, but accidentally do heroic things. And I think that can be an angle too. I use this reference sparingly because most of the time somebody makes fun of me for it, but Xena, of which I've watched all, and I thoroughly enjoyed all of it. Go ahead and poke at me all you want. So in Xena, there's Joxer, and Joxer's kind of this bumbling knucklehead who messes up all kinds of things, but he accidentally does heroic things. Chris S. went straight after Frodo. So, and there are other characters that are like that. Oh God, Misa. There's Jar Jar.
You could have said his name without doing that voice.
Yeah,
you wanted to. You're like, yes, an excuse to say the Jar Jar voice.
If any of you ever want to entertain yourselves, go read. This guy did this Reddit post that is why Jar Jar Binks is actually a Sith Lord in disguise.
Oh yeah, that was funny.
He presents a really good case and gives all these examples of Jar Jar accidentally slaughtering droids and stuff. Oh man, like Jar Jar Binks' kill count at the end of the movies is higher than some of the Jedi. Khaleesi?
Frodo's a good example of a character who you're like, yeah, this is a guy does not have a lot going for him. He's probably going to die. And if not for their skills in running away, happenstance, and random luck, as well as the heroes around him, yeah, pretty much they were going to die. And he failed his wisdom save at the end anyway. Should have bumped that stat up sometime.
You get stat boosts. You can only fight being bad at stuff for so long before you learn.
You just distribute them so you have all 14s at the end of a 20th level character.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. But if you have fun acting through a character and you feel that you need to have a weak mechanical character to kind of get you in that mode, go ahead and do it. I'm just saying that I dislike that kind of character. And I think that you can still have a mechanically acceptable character, not like a super maxed out character, but a mechanically acceptable character, and still play flaws and still have your role-playing aspect to it and not have problems.
Mm-hmm. There's really, I guess what we're dealing with is both of the extremes.
Yes, both the extremes of that. Yeah. And the reasons behind that, like, the people that pick that, they can also have reasons behind that kind of drive a certain way of playing that can disrupt the game as well.
Jay Spence makes a comment that traverses time. This comment has been true in D&D forever and all other role-playing games and is now true in video games as well. Jay Spence said, support classes can be fun, just never getting the killing blow is something you live with.
Yes.
Yeah.
As a cleric, save my entire group from a whole bunch of elementals by banishing them with Holy Word.
Mm-hmm.
Still get dropped and almost killed by the explosions that are caused by the things that the guys fight. Yeah. Gotta get picked up off the ground at the end of the fight.
Oh yeah, and Deacon Newcomb says min-maxing is fine. It's only if you step on another player's toes that it becomes an issue. That includes the DM. So, and I agree. Okay. If that's the prerogative of the group, it would really be stepping on someone's toes. Let's say in our Spelljamming game right now, I made Bob the Wonder Twin, and I'm like super uber awesome at everything. Well, I'd step on everyone else's toes because it's always going to be down to what does Kienata roll? What did Kienata do? You know what I mean? And then nobody else gets to have fun.
I don't like the stepping on the toes thing. It's a major thing for some of the other Nerdarchy crew, but I disagree with it. I say this. For example, if I was to make a new character class that had the Barbarian's ability to have reduced damage or had a rage-like mechanic. Well, that was not a good example. Maybe natural armor. Let's just say they had natural armor. Let's go with that. So what, like natural armor, and they fought. All right, well, that's kind of similar to a few other classes that have natural armor or a type of armor, another way of calculating armor. But really, is that anybody that swings a sword, like what's the reference points for what's stepping on whose toes? You know, like if we're all swinging swords or axes or whatever in combat and we're dropping enemies, aren't we all kind of doing the same thing? My argument is you can have two battle masters, the same exact level, the same exact race, and have completely different characters. So it's actually irrelevant what they do in combat. So I always kind of dislike the stepping on toes argument, because it really is, in a role-playing game where we're not just, you know, like pieces on a board, we can play so completely different. I mean, we've got two warlocks in a party. Do you even, in Doug's game, does everybody even know we have two warlocks if they didn't say they were both warlocks? Do you know what I mean? Like, well, I barely know they're both warlocks. And I know because I'm playing the game.
I think it would be more an example of, because I was speaking from the perspective of someone is, without question, beyond reproach, much more powerful than the rest of the party.
Yeah, but that's the thing in it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, let's say we're just going to go back to D&D. In D&D, I don't really feel like that happens much.
You sound like you're going to stop breathing any second. I just hear like, are you struggling right now?
I'm struggling to not snort through my nose when I close my mouth and swallow. Because normally, you know, when you close your mouth and you swallow, air goes through your nose. It does make a really
attractive whistle sound, just so you...
Yeah. When you close your nose and swallow, normally the excess air goes out your nose. Well, when it can't...
I don't have any excess air. I need all of this. Okay, we have a question.
Yes, sure.
Nerded Doug, do you think sometimes people optimize in a bubble in the sense they don't account for being in a group with others? I think that's a very good question.
I think that does happen. I'm just not... I can't think of any particular example I would say would necessarily be at a detriment to the group. I guess if you super specialize, let's say, okay, you know, they almost made the Cavalier have to pretty much be a mounted combat person. Mm-hmm. And if they had done that, that would have made a specialized character that doesn't do well in dungeon crawls, that doesn't do well in towns, that doesn't do well in all these other scenarios where you can't have your mount. So there's a lot of... Basically, that would make a specialized character. And then you say, oh, by the way, this is a seafaring campaign. So good luck using any of your Cavalier abilities on anything except a really long deck of a ship.
I'm riding a dolphin.
So
I got this.
Let's say that you're not riding a dolphin. You're kind of stuck in a situation. That would be like an example of making a really good, nice, hard-hitting character inside of a bubble because you don't really kind of like have a sense of what else is going on.
Winnie the Fox has you covered. Gnome Cavalier rides his war corgi everywhere. There is some context for this. 5th edition is a much harder edition to make this kind of min-maxing or optimizing in a bubble kind of comparison with, because 5th edition is very well balanced, and up until very recently, most RPG systems could not boast this level of balance. Most of them did not have this kind of granularity to the system. But I could definitely see someone sitting down and saying, I got all of this awesome homebrew stuff off the internet. I'm a half-giant barbarian that came from the Fire Giant clan, so I have some cool fire abilities. And I maximized my character build because I'm level 9 to have as much constitution as humanly possible. And I have like a 26 strength. And so this character has worked to maximize their person in a bubble. Meanwhile, the rest of the group
has been... and he's dead.
Right. The rest of the group was making their gnome cavalier riding a war corgi. And they show up and they're like, really? You're a what? I felt awesome until I came to the game table and found out you're a half fire giant. This is not good for me. Like, I thought we were all gonna. My D8 doesn't feel great anymore now. You know.
So thanks, James and Patrick, for telling me that I can breathe through my ears or my eyes. So I mean, I understand that you know that's all connected up there.
I don't understand why you're not breathing through your ears already. Makes perfect sense to me.
Well, they are popping a little bit, so maybe maybe I'm trying. It's just not working out. Just ride the fire giant. A war corgi on a fire giant. Unstoppable duo.
You just master blaster that. You just get the gnomish cavalier up there hanging onto an earring on the half giant. That's the way you do it.
That's a good way to go. So as far as the like overall like super character, I really like you're saying. I think in 5th that's kind of hard to do, where you're good at everything. I mean, because basically in 5th, if you sacrifice, like let's say you multi-class into 3 classes, like I can heal, I can cast magic missile, and I have action surge. I'm awesome. Well, when you're 15th level, whenever you're an odd level in the teens, that single class wizard is going to be more awesome than you. It doesn't really matter you have cure wounds. And when they got 9th level spells first, you're going to be wishing that you had not multi-classed. Unless if you've solely based your character off of being like that super character. Because once you get to the higher levels, you're going to have issues with being that spread out multi-class character. So I don't see the issue being... I don't really see the issue being with that character that spreads himself out. Like a rogue, let's say you do rogue and bard and ranger. So you've got all these skills. So you've got survival and somebody else also has survival. Well, you can just help each other out. Or yeah, I know.
I keep reading their stuff and I'm laughing about it. I'm sorry. Nate makes a Constitution saving throw to breathe through your ears. Make the roll, Nate. God, you're holding up the game.
I think that may be a cursed book you've just found. He's one of the players. So, that person's spreading out. So I don't really see the effect that like I have not. There's only one time I went into a game and I said, "Wow, this character just kind of blows everything away," and it was a Vengeance Paladin Warlock combo. That we just kept taking short rests, and he could just smite the heck out of everything, every single combat. And when he's outperforming the rogue sneak attack damage consistently long enough because of all the spell slots for the entire combat, you're like, well, crud, that's kind of underwhelming for all the other damaging characters, and none of the spellcasters could compete with that. So yes, there is a few character concepts that you can slap together, especially with multiclass, in which you can have that kind of issue.
The Mighty Hob brings up. He said, "It's not like the player who does the most damage gets more XP."
This is true.
Speaking to not understanding the obsession with doing damage, but there are several things that have to be taken into account. One is some players that I've had will come to the table and they kind of think it's a competition for who's the best killing machine. Sometimes campaigns tend to be very combat centric, and then the person who does the most damage kind of gets to go, I'm carrying the team. I'm Jordan and you guys are helping. So it really depends. It really depends on this. I say it's very situational how valuable the amount of damage you do is. I felt useless compared to everybody else a few times already in Spelljammer, but I've gotten some pointers on ways I can make myself more valuable. So,
like remembering that you can do force damage.
But yeah,
that's an important thing. You could also cast Hunter's Mark, by the way.
Yeah, haven't cast Hunter's Mark. Totally forgot it. Forgot about using extra force damage on our bullet fight or bullet fight or however you boulet. God, whichever one you want.
Boulet mignon. Yum, 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 yum.
Boulet, delicious boulet mignon. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're doing a D6, a D8, and then your weapon damage at that point.
It's delicious. Still haven't managed to do more than like 10 damage in a hit, but whatever.
Well, yeah, that's kind of embarrassing, but you know,
You should,
not all of us can be
thanks.
average fighters.
Appreciate the backup, Nate.
Yeah, but you can
Be
sense
on the
plating your
internet forever.
you can sense plating your energy and gates and all kinds of cool stuff that I can't do.
No, Doug, I did not mean literally useless. I just felt like, man, I wish I could do better because the team is doing awesome. And I'm like, thank goodness Nub Nub is a killing machine and Nate's flinging hot rocks on it. And Sierra
Yeah.
Cass was nuking things with her dark side. Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, Doug, don't worry. I think I saw when you made when you had it available that his character was very useful.
Yeah.
He's just lamenting currently just a few numbers that happen through the game.
Yes. Terrible damage rolls and that kind of thing.
Yes, best cooking RPG on the net is absolutely true. In Just Quest.
Who's giving Chunder a break in the kitchen? This guy.
Yeah, and how are we supposed to find plating your gates and things without you? We'll
I
have to
know.
stumble upon them. Maybe somebody dies when they fall through. We can't send out like the recon drones
Oh, that would be
into
cool.
into the portals. I mean, I might send a mouse and see if it comes back, but mouse on a string.
Salutations from Central Jersey. Welcome from Central Jersey.
Oh, hey, not too far away. Hey, I'm from Jersey, and I say New Jersey like this. New Jersey. This is not a fake accent that I'm trying to do for the internet. This is the way at least 50% of New Jersey talks. Not like that strangeness that you hear on TV and people say, oh, I'm from Jersey or whatever. I can't even do the accent properly. Yes, that's where like it only takes 3 hours to get across the state, but it is like completely different countries practically.
I lived in Virginia for a long time, and everyone assumed I would have some form of like accent. I would talk a certain way because that's how some of them people in Virginia talked. And I was like, I don't talk that way because I never learned how to. I remember in school one time in class with the kids I went to school with, they talk like this. And one of them said to me, you talk like you got butter in your mouth.
That's great. That is a classic.
I was like, what did you just say? That is amazing, sir. I enjoy how you express yourself. Yeah. So more useful out of combat. Jan, yes. The Fitzroy Brumblebottom character was meant to be entertaining, fun. Getting better there.
Okay, so this is a good time, I guess, to discuss the idea. Everybody has their time where they're going to be like, I excel at this at XYZ thing. If you go into the game thinking that you can excel at everything that the game throws at you, you're going to hit those walls where you're like, well, I'm good at combat, and I'm just like fighting, and you come on the scenario where you can't fight your way out of it. And that's kind of like the conflict where you're going to have an issue where, well, do you try and just fight your way out of it, or do you reconsider that perhaps one of the other players might like to do something awesome that makes it so that you get through the encounter? So if you've done a lot of fighting encounters and you're used to basically being the person that helps everybody win, then, the GM taking that group of players and putting them in a different scenario can assist in other players. So it's kind of like everyone gets like spotlighting. So you spotlight different people's abilities, allowing them all to kind of shine in their own ways. Either that or they enjoy the combat in their own way, such as turning into strange creatures.
Dude, yeah, he has so much fun with that.
Yes, and
I've wanted to be Gambit since the character was created when I was like 12 or 13 or whatever.
And you didn't even know you were going to play Gambit until you
had no
were like,
idea.
hey, by the way, you can charge your weapons and do force damage. Isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
You're like, oh my gosh, I'm Gambit.
Yeah, I was like, now my kitchen knives, because I kind of thought about throwing kitchen knives, but it was much cooler when I could be like, wah, 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 wah. Yeah.
And everybody's got their different particularities and peculiarities. And when you have a well-rounded group like that, that isn't all just focused on being good at combat, or is it just all focused on being fantastic spellcasters? But you have some people who are kind of face characters, kind of not. And then in different situations, like there's an example of there was a particular crustacean creature we interacted with. There are other better face characters than the two bug people. I mean, the spider and the bug person. But in that case, we were all crustacean-like exoskeleton creatures. So it kind of made sense for us to all interact together. But but you've got the situations where most of the time, you know, you've got the bard or the other type of face characters or the really charismatic fighter or a paladin that is going to kind of take on those roles. But that doesn't mean just like everybody else stop talking. They can still interact in their own way, and that's where you can get like an interesting dynamic to what you're doing in the actual game as a whole with that group.
Andrew Cole has a question for you, Nate. What do you thinking? What do you thinking? I like words. What do you think of casting the spell Dragon Breath on a familiar? I assume that word is familiar. Would you let it work?
Let me think about that for just a moment. Especially at that moment involves me looking up the spell on D&D Beyond.
And yes, the GM for our game is amazing. Doug is epic, and without the storytelling, nobody gets to shine. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's the storytelling that can really bring out the different attributes of the different people.
Thrown by Kevin Toft said, "Fun fact: thrown butter knives are both piercing and bludgeoning damage."
And Hunter's Mark and the force, the planar force damage. You're looking at a really deadly butter knife, like sneak attack level damage.
That's fantastic. That's good.
Plus, you get to add your dex modifier to it.
Yeah.
All right, so Dragon's Breath is you touch one willing creature. That's like the first bit, is that you touch one willing creature. So, yeah, why not? I gotta tell you, though, I'm gonna, as an intelligent creature at all, I'm gonna kill the thing breathing fire on me, and it's got 1 hit point. So, it's not lasting long. But yeah, absolutely.
Jan Novak has an interesting question, and this is something that I think we've talked about this once before. What about a cleric out of combat spamming guidance on everything for everyone?
Sorry, just one extra thing. I don't recall what actions a familiar can take. So it doesn't say anything about attacking. It says it can use an action. So as long as that's legit with the rules. But you can absolutely cast it on it. Whether or not the familiar can do the action, I'd have to look at the familiar rules. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, okay. So question that I lost. There it is. What about cleric out of combat spamming guidance on everything for everyone? So they're just like shooting off guidance for the players in the group constantly.
Well, you can do one a turn.
Yeah.
And is it guidance saving throws or skills? I'm trying to remember exactly what it's for. It's
you gotta run out of spells eventually.
Well, no, guidance you find because it's a cantrip. But you could do things like Sacred Flame or bless people. I mean, if you blessed everybody and then you just guidance every turn, why not? I mean, if that's the way you want to play the kind of like assistant in a way, and then maybe you're saving yourself for when you need to do things like
there we go.
A D4 for 1d4 for skills.
Yeah,
I guess it depends on what they're going to do. If they're going to try and like athletically grapple somebody, then yeah, they're going to need that little boost for strength, for the strength checks. But
and you're saying
think of different ways that you like need to do it every turn.
Everything the players are doing, the cleric is just hanging out in the back, going, "Did you just ask him to make a skill check? Guidance. Did you just ask him to make a skill check? Guidance."
Yeah, but if you ready your action to cast guidance, you've used your reaction and your action to cast guidance, right?
You're just waiting to hit the buzzer. Like, just
so you've got your bonus action left and your movement. Well,
you're
I mean,
in
you
a
can
conversation.
do cool things like spirit. Let's say you do spiritual weapon. So spiritual weapon plus using guidance. I mean, there's ways of doing it, and I guess if there was a skill heavy thing going on, but I wouldn't pick that way of using a cleric. There's other ways that you could kind of buff the party. I mean, Bless is a great example. Aid is a second level one that's really good.
Jan is clarifying, saying no, it's out of combat situations. That's what I was saying. Just out of combat, I'm following your character or the group around, and every time the GM says make a skill check, I throw out guidance.
Oh, right.
Just
okay.
Like, would you ask him guidance?
It's not okay. In that case, it's not a reaction. It is you casting it. So you have to kind of know they're going to do something. So if it's like, hey, this is a place we could get ambushed. I'm going to cast guidance on you, and then you can look around and perceive what's going on. Or we're going to climb a mountain. I'm going to cast guidance on you, so when you climb it, you have a chance of us succeeding, a better chance of succeeding. Those situations I think are totally legit because, I mean, it's a cantrip slot. You could have taken other things with that cantrip slot. But I would say, if you're sitting there and every single time anyone has ever asked to make a skill check, then that's kind of it's not counterspell, it's not shield, it's not like attack of opportunity. It doesn't work that way. So I would say instead that seems like something that's a little overplayed at that point. Be like, hey, if someone's like, I want to look through this pile of dirt, and I see a guy looking through a pile of dirt for something, I'm going to cast guidance on him. Okay, that seems legit. But if like someone's over there and you're like, oh, you asked to make a perception check, I'm going to cast guidance on him. And that's kind of like, well, do you even know he's actually needs to be looking for something right now? Or is he just like going over and like picking some strawberries off of a plant or something?
He's looking for a restroom.
Yeah, I don't think he needs guidance for that. But if the hidden goblins right there, yes, he could use some guidance for it. But he doesn't obviously look like he's searching, so why would you cast guidance on him?
I would probably take a spin on that, and I'd be like, if you want to do this and consistently help the group, you need to tell me you've casted on them ahead of when if I suddenly ask you to make a skill check. You know what I mean?
There's a little clarification. It can last up to a minute. Is that what I'm understanding? Yes. So he just always has guidance on everybody. I don't know if there's any.
Johnny Pumpkinhead, I think I can take this one. Question: water breathing lasts 24 hours. You can cast it as a ritual and it affects an entire group of people. Is my character ritually casting it on the party every morning considered metagaming? No, I would consider it paranoid, but I that's kind of like saying every morning take your vitamin. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Hey, if it lasts 24 hours and you can ritual cast it and it doesn't have a spell component, that's like expensive. It might have a spell component that's that expensive. I don't know.
Rick, have an excellent night. Thanks for hanging out, dude.
Thanks for stopping by, Rick.
Ooh, there we go. Nerdator Doug dropped some clarification. You can only have guidance on one target at a time and concentrate on it. So,
okay. Thank you. There is concentration, so it does limit it to one person. And I was also thinking, well, if they didn't make a concentration, wouldn't that be a little too powerful as a cantrip?
Mm-hmm.
Because you'd have the situation where someone would cast it on the entire party all the time, and you'd have it all the time. All right, thank you, Doug. I was getting a little too tired to figure out certain mechanics tonight.
Brain no worky.
Well, I'm trying to talk rather than breathe deeply. So it's affecting my my mental combat skills.
I had a minor explosion in my internet. My server next to me is tracking stuff, and it was like, I don't think it was your internet, dude. I think it was mine. My server is telling me that my internet exploded for a little while, so the alarm just popped up. Yeah.
So Andrew Cole, we have a question: if you cast Charm Person or on someone, could you ask them to be willing subject for a spell like Feign Death? Well, Feign Death doesn't hurt them.
Yeah, it doesn't directly harm them. Keep in mind, however you answer this question is how it's going to get played. Your answer will be divine. They'll be able to be like, look, I have the YouTube video right here. This is Doug. This is Nate. Doug. This is Nate.
Disclaimer.
Yeah.
If you're doing a I'm asking mom because dad said no. So you're whatever your DM says, it's what's going to be. Just putting it out there. But if you're casting something on them that is going to make them not be hurt, then maybe they would let you cast it on them. I mean, heck, charmed people let vampires bite them, so...
Jan,
but that's a special kind of charm, though.
Jan, you don't have to apologize for your English. My every other language skills don't exist, so your English is awesome. Doing good. Yeah, exactly, Nerditor Doug. Well, Nerdarchy says I can. Yeah, you got to be really careful. Read D&D Beyond carefully, drop the disclaimer, answer the question.
All right, so this is the thing. Charmed creature can't attack the charmer or target the charmer with harmful abilities or magic effects. So that means the charmed creature can't do it to you. And you've got bonuses for social interactions. So you could say, well, you're charmed, so I'm going to persuade you to accept the spell. And since the spell's not going to actually hurt them, that could be a situation in which I could see that happening. Be like, heck, if it was actually beneficial or neutral, like, well, yeah, sure, we're buddies. You could cast this on me. But if it's feigned death, it might be one of those situations where, like, well, I've got stuff to do, and I'm worried about, can I eat? Am I going to starve if I don't eat while I'm on feigned death? And, like, so there's...
This is a challenging question, because at what point does the person perceive their life being in danger?
Well, I mean, if you didn't think this person was a good friend of yours, which you do when you're charmed, you think they're a friendly acquaintance, and they're like, oh, I'm going to cast a spell on you, and it's not going to hurt you. And you believe them. They are telling the truth. It's not going to hurt them. What they're going to do to you in your feigned death is another story. They might put you in a box and throw you overboard. But, hey, if you found ways of charming when they're charmed, casting spells on them that they can willingly accept that don't necessarily hurt them, then I guess feigned death's one of them, I would think.
I don't know. If one of my friends walked up to me and handed me a pill and said, take this pill, it won't hurt you. Not even my mother. I'd be like, no, that's not going in my mouth or entering my body in any way. Take it away. Yeah, there'd just be no way. So I don't know.
Yeah, so that's the thing. Again, yeah, it's like casting spells on me. What are you going to do to me? I mean, you've already charmed them, so...
Right.
You've already haha, joke's on them. You already cast a spell on them. So that's iffy. Because can a person actually... Well, it's not a saving throw, is it? It's just if they're willing.
Yeah, they're willing.
I'm up in the air about it, because I kind of don't think I'd let somebody cast spells on me that were not beneficial, I guess. I'd be kind of concerned now that I think about it. You get resistant to all damage except psychic. That's pretty cool.
Slavic. Oh, it's a Slavic Czech Republic. Ah, cool. I know a bunch of people from Keen Software House in the Czech Republic. That's excellent. Yes, Pet Shop, you did not miss the... I always have to remember not to say your full name, however unfortunate it may be. You did not miss the stream. You're here, sir.
Ramon, we've got a question. How do you manage creation? Yeah. How do you manage creation and alteration of spells? You have allowed it, but now they are using it in other ways, like transmutation of a solid into another solid and make clothes metal. Okay. Yeah, it's tricky when you do anything besides, like, make fireball an ice ball or a lightning ball or something like that. Once you start changing things other than damage types, it can get a bit tricky. Yeah. So, and if you've already had it happen, and then they start using it in different ways, you're like, well, I really never intended it to be able to be used that way.
Iron Hill turnips.
So I'd prefer that we just say that you don't, like, basically, hey, I said this spell works this particular way. I did not kind of like green light it for these other ways. Do you know what I mean?
This is a one-time use.
There's ways. So, for example, animate object has certain stipulations. If you don't follow the stipulations, you can't get it to work. So in that case, you say, well, I've got particular stipulations for this spell. If you use it in other ways, it might not work. And then you can make judgment calls on those individual ways. Or you can say, look, can you stop screwing me over? I let you make a spell. Can you stop sticking it to me? I mean, geez, I could just say everything out of the book and that's it. Excuse me.
Metal armor.
And metal clothes do not equate metal armor. Just to say, just because something's made out of metal does not mean it protects you.
It would protect you more than clothes, but it would not protect you perfectly.
Yeah, but can you imagine the skin, the problems you're going to have if you don't basically wear it like armor?
I think this would depend on how thematic we want it to be. If we want, how much science are we going to bring into the argument? If we're going to bring a bunch of science into the argument, I'd be like, look, here's the deal.
Well, they just did cast a spell that turned it into metal armor.
Yeah. If you're going to turn cloth into a sheet of steel on your chest, it's going to really hurt when you get hit by like anything. But if we just want it to be thematic, then maybe it'll block that arrow or save your day. You know what I mean? Like, it just depends on how we want to play it out.
Yeah, Ramon, he says, I love to allow players to create fun spells, but some might get a little overpowered. Yeah, and that's going to be, if you err on the side of this is a fun spell, but it's not as powerful as a spell of that type. But there was a situation where we made the spell Sword Tears. Ace and Shardgale, played by Scott, who wanted to make a cool spell. Where like he wanted to be able to just like any metal weapon in sight, he wanted to turn to water. And I'm like, oh, that sounds really cool and like an epic level spell. So I guess my issue with it was that it blew away like so many things because there aren't many things that just permanently transform someone's weapon, disarming them, into something else that you don't get back because the water dissolves into the earth and bam, it's done. So there was a lot of back and forth we did to try and get a spell he was interested in casting, but that was also in line with how the game worked for 5th edition. Yeah. And I feel like we made a good balanced spell, but I feel like we fell short of the spell he had interest in casting. And that happens sometimes, and if you go the other way, like, and we said, oh, it's a 3rd level spell and you can turn an entire army's swords into water, Sword Tears, yeah, I bet all those firefighter warriors would be crying right before they got their heads chopped off by the opposing army.
Yeah.
So there is that kind of gauge of balance. If you're a player and you want to make this spell, imagine getting hit with a spell when you're the person that is going to be the person that's going to be combated with this spell. If they can basically accept it on their side, then what else are your arguments against it in that sense?
Getting Ironwood. I think I made up in a completely different setting. I made up this thing called a goblin, but it was little children that were like orphan children from a war. They all went into the woods and the spirits of the woods took care of the children and they were called goblins. And the spirits of the wood would enhance wooden items to make them like metal. So the goblins all wore these crazy masks, which is why they were called goblins. They wear all these crazy steely masks and had like sharp sticks that were as hard as steel and stuff. But there are a lot of easier ways to get an ironwood weapon or ironwood armor to a druid. There was like 20 options in there. Then especially considering the fact that for like 1/10 the amount of gold, you can get a gorgeously carved suit of wooden plate mail versus a handcrafted suit of actual plate mail. Just saying.
There are some benefits. I mean, basically pay for split mail, get plate mail.
I'm glad you like the origin story on that, Kevin.
Yeah, that does sound really cool.
It's they're not actual God. They're still children. They just never grow up. It's kind of a Peter Pan thing.
But instead they have wooden swords that are like steel and wear these cool masks.
The cool masks is really what did it for me.
Yeah, I would say
Sounds
so.
like the Mononoke spirits. Since when did the ape tribe eat the flesh of man? Oh man.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, that movie is imprinted on me forever. When I die, a little piece of my soul is Princess Mononoke. Like that's
Now I gotta watch it again. It's been a really long time.
Oh god, it's so good. It's so good. Even after you cut a wolf's head off, it can still bite.
So
it's good.
Cody Sams. Does perception override core rules? If you use a illusion to make a weapon appear metal, does a druid then have a penalty? If so, would it work the other way to prevent it? I don't know. What's the kind of prohibition in druids in 5th edition? I just thought they didn't have access to those weapons. Because they don't have, they've got like simple weapons and stuff. Which is basically not swords and not any of that other stuff. So perception doesn't override core rules in that sense. I thought you meant the skilled perception, because basically that would be the case of a specific rule breaking the general rule.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the way the whole game system for 5e works, is if there's general rules, and then there's a whole bunch of character classes that break the rules that were set out in the general. Similarly, skills break the rules that are set out in the general as well, by either adding or altering what can occur based on who has or has not does not have those skills. But as far as a person thinking that there's a weapon that they can't use, and then picking it up because it looks wooden and being able to use it.
James Leslie has some clarity for us. In 5th edition, they just aren't proficient. 3.5 in Pathfinder, they actually have an active restriction.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure 5th edition dropped a lot of the restrictions. I mean, like, paladins don't have to be lawful good, and druids didn't have to worry about the whole thing with whether or not it's wooden. They just, again, I was like, well, they've got access to sickles, daggers, and they don't have long swords or stuff like that. And they've got scimitars, and those are definitely metal weapons. So, yeah, I wouldn't worry about that for 5th edition anyway. I mean, if you're playing another edition, I don't know. I think it could be a pretty cool story.
I'll be totally honest. Yeah.
If someone's trying to basically allow a druid to use a sword, and they're like, oh, it's a wooden weapon. You're totally fine. All right.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah. Honestly, it's not going to break my game or change my day if you want to be a guy, you're Brunhilde, the barbarian woman who lived with the dwarven tribes, and she fought all her life, and then she met an elf and decided she likes elves, and the elves are all druids, and she became a druid, but she kept her two-handed sword. Okay, sure. That's not going to end my day. If you want to be a druid with a two-hander, dive in.
And I think that's what they did with 5th edition, is say, like, what's it really matter in the end?
Yeah, like, really? You sure that two-hander's damage is going to offset the balance of the druid? I don't think so.
And you had to pay for it either by using a feat, weapon master, or by taking another class to kind of balance it out. So,
yeah. Okay. We are at recap. We have hit our time limitation.
Could you take it away on the recap, please? I am finito when it comes to talking.
Tonight we talked about everything. All right, we're done. I nailed it. I killed that recap. That was amazing.
We talked a thumb or two.
We talked about the high points and low points of character creation. We talked about I guess the G.I. Joe lesson that you can take out of this Go Joe is try and make sure everybody at the table gets to have a good time. And if you pick a specific combination that is keeping someone else from getting a moment in the spotlight or making your games master's day incredibly difficult, then the first thing you should be thinking about is everyone getting to have a good time, regardless of what you're doing.
Well, some people are just grumpy people. I'm going to put that caveat in there. Some people just don't know how to good time.
Yeah, I don't want to have a good time. Fine, grumpy bear. Okay.
A berserker, that sounds great. All right, well, I am unable to talk for much longer. The 2 hours has magically gone by so fast. If you would like to check out other Nerdarchy After Dark, feel free to check out our other Friday shows, or let us know about what you would like to see, and maybe we'll bring it up as a topic, because realistically, I think it was like 8 o'clock when we decided, or kind of tried to hash out what we were even talking about tonight. So if someone gave us an idea, we may grab it and cling to it.
We could have a night where everyone literally just brings a question.
We could also do that. So
yeah,
let us know in the comments below. If you're watching on Twitch, please check us out next time. We've got a schedule there. And until next time, stay nerdy.
Stay nerdy.